Okay, so let's open it up for questions here. Let me get the question panel undocked and out here in the wider space here. I had a comment from somebody, Max, saying that there was no sound, but I'm not seeing any problem here at my end, and Max is still here, so I'm assuming that that he did get his sound problem resolved. Ramya asks, relevant to, I believe, this slide here, what is REGR? It has to do with regression. It's the how are we going to approach regression testing? Let's see. A question from Vladimir. Are you recording this session? I would like to download it. Thanks for the information. We are recording it. You can't download it, but you can listen to it on our YouTube channel or on our digital library. Thomas says, great presentation as always. Thank you. Should there be a percentage pass criteria as part of the exit criteria? If so, what is a typically acceptable percentage? Well, I'm really not a big fan of hard coding that stuff into the exit criteria. Especially percentage test case passed, because the percentage of test cases passed or failed is such a it's a number that can have a lot of different meanings depending on which tests have passed, which have failed. I mean, you could be 90% passed, but the 10% that have failed are really important, or they could be really trivial. Also, the size of tests can vary, so test case counts tend to be a pretty bad metric that way. So I'm not a huge fan of that. Now, that's something I will report, as well as reporting things like risk coverage and requirements coverage and how many are pass-fail rates for those. And that's part of the metrics that I would be reporting in the exit meetings, but I would not be hard coding that into the criteria myself. Question from Jay here. Does the test release management reside in the test plan or in the test strategy? Well, let's see. If we're looking at this kind of really generic, go back here, this kind of really generic level of information, we can put that in the strategy, yes. And then what you can do is, if there is project-specific stuff, then discuss that in the plan. But yeah, the general rule is, you're dealing with an ongoing operation, try to migrate as much as you can up into the strategy. Brijesh says, so in essence, test strategy is a document that does not, there's a blank here, does not something for a project after being defined, does not, I guess, change for a project after being defined. However, a test plan can change with changes occurring in the test lifecycle. For example, if there are schedule changes. Would it be fair to say that? Yes. The test strategy is a project-independent general way of talking about how we go about testing, while the test plan is project-specific, and thus as the project evolves, the plan needs to evolve with it. But the strategy remains the same. And to the extent that on a particular project we are going to deviate from the strategy, the plan can talk about the deviation from the strategy and how we're going to do that. Jay Fry says a follow-up, it says or test policy. I assume he's talking about the test release management going to test policy. I would not put the test release management in the test policy, because test release management is a how. It's not a why. It's, you test releases enable testing. And so that's, something that's, it's a how we do something. Paul says, test plan is a bad word where I work and not allowed. Well, that's interesting. I don't know why it would be a bad word unless it's connoted with some sort of completely extraneous document that's not connected with reality. But regardless of whether people allow the use of a quote-unquote test plan, surely test planning is something that has to happen. So, you know, the issue I think would be, is there a question of relevance? Is the documents that's being, or documents that are being produced, are they irrelevant? Partha says, should there be a separate test policy for each phase of testing, like system test, integration test, performance test, load test, etc.? Separate policy or single policy? I would say that there should be a single policy, because what I want to do is tie together the testing. You know, what are we trying to accomplish in general with testing? And then now you could have presumably a separate strategy for each one of those types of testing, but then that introduces the possibility of gaps or overlaps. So I would say that the strategy should be unified as well. Christian says, very instructive, thanks. I will share this presentation with our QA leaders team as part of our improvement schedule. Okay. You will be able to find the recorded version in the next few days, Christian, so you can direct them to our website to take a look at that. Anjali says, how frequently should we update the test plan, strategy, and policy? What procedures should be followed to update these? Well, the plan needs to be updated as needed as the project goes along, and you know, there are various approaches to doing that. You can either actually update the document itself, or you can just use some sort of change log and just log changes. For example, I've used an Access database or an Excel spreadsheet for this to log deviations from the plan as we update it. Kind of depends on what you want to do. The strategy and policy should probably undergo regular reviews. I'd say at least once a year, maybe twice a year, to keep those up to date. Obviously, if during the course of a project they discover that there's something missing from the strategy, then you want to think about adding that to the strategy. Shesha asks, how do we maintain test plans when more than one version of the same code is maintained to satisfy different customer needs? Well, I would think that the plan might be different for the different customers. If you forked the code and you're putting different features in place for the different customers, then yeah, you could potentially have different plans. Might or might not be a generic strategy that would apply there. You would have to try to keep it fairly generic. So I think there are ways to have, you know, to reuse documentation that you'd want to pursue. Vinay, comment, very good and informative presentation on sample exit criteria. Should be noted that all business requirements must be met. If they are not met, then the test lead or person who's writing the test plan should also mention. That actually, yeah, the way that we did that, go back to that example, was here with item 7. Oops. Let me, sorry, I got to deal with some issues. Product stability and reliability, completion of planned tests, adequate coverage of the critical quality risks. We didn't have a really good set of requirements there, so we used risks as our test basis. But yes, if you're doing a requirements-based, if you're following a requirements-based testing strategy, then you could have requirements coverage there as well. Let's see. Let me get this. Just had something odd go on with the question panel. Let me fix that. Janice says, can you have a test policy, strategy, and plans without software development policy, strategies, and plans? What happens here can't exist in a vacuum. Yeah, well, that's definitely true, and that's just as a general observation, the maturity of the test process can't be higher than the maturity of the overall software development process because it puts a constraint in place. You can have those documents in place and try to sort of lead a greater level of maturity for the project, the development team as a whole. But that's something that you need to approach with a lot of caution. Yeah, if you're trying to introduce a lot of structure and maturity into your testing operation and it just doesn't exist for the broader organization, then you're gonna be playing an evangelist role in a sense. Gardner says, well done presentation. Quick administration question. What was the PDU code for the PMI? So everybody who attended will be receiving an email, and that's an attendee confirmation email, and that email has the PDU code that you can use for PMI. So you'll get that information over the next couple of days. So just watch for a follow-up email from Citrix that will give you that information. Joseph asks, any advice on providing testing strategy and support through a centralized organization in order to remove or reduce that overhead within the project teams? In other words, standardized practices based upon the type of project. Well, I would say that, if you're basically an internal testing service provider in an organization providing testing services across multiple projects, standardizing your methodology and strategy is great, and that should definitely help with efficiency. But you also want to make sure that you preserve the flexibility to deviate from the strategy on each project via the test plans to make sure that you have taken project-specific variables into account. So make sure that you do try to balance those different objectives. Ken says, Rex, great mentoring as always. Thank you for that. Do you like to see testing risks maintained in the test plan or the project's risk document? If you have a mature risk management strategy, practice, whatever you want to call it, in place on your projects, and you feel confident that the test-related project risks can be managed effectively within the context of that process, I would say you could go ahead and include a lot of them there. The only thing is that some of those risks, there are some that you might look at and say, it actually would be counterproductive to expose the broader world to the existence of this risk and what we're doing to deal with it. I can't think of any examples right off the top of my head, but just in general, I've found that sometimes exposing people from outside of the testing group to too much of the sort of testing sausage making is not a good plan. Sometimes it can turn into an invitation to jump in and micromanage you, which you definitely want to avoid. So, I'd say yes, generally one could do that, but there might be certain risks that you would prefer to manage on your own off of that list. Entry criteria. So James says entry criteria, you do not mention resource availability. Do you not think this is important enough for the test plan? Oh, yeah, I think that's if you're in a situation where there are additional resources that are going to need to be provided to you above and beyond the test environment immediately prior to test execution starting, then I would definitely put those in there. Now, if you're in a situation where the entire team and all of the resources other than the test environment are going to be available to you prior to test execution, then that's not an entry criteria for test execution. That's an entry criteria for the larger activity that you're engaged in. Stephanie says, when we put together our policy, we want our strategy to define the main points of our policy, correct? If this is the case, Is there a good rule of thumb to ensure that we aren't too vague or in-depth on the strategy? So yes, you want complete alignment between the policy and the strategy. The strategy talks about how to implement the policy. There should be traceability from the policy, the objectives and so forth defined in the policy, down to the strategy and how you're going to carry it out. Now, in terms of the degree of detail that you're going to put in the strategy, well, that's really going to be determined by what can you say generally, and what gets into project specific. You don't want to have so much detail in there that you're trying to describe all the possibilities on every different possible type of project that happen. You want to be general in the strategy document, and if there's variation that's going to happen project by project, that stuff goes in the plan. I would say just, any time you spend documenting is time you spend not doing other things, basically, right? It takes away from other activities. So if in doubt, start off with less documentation and add to it as you find you need more, rather than start out with more documentation and then find out, God, this is so much information that it overwhelms people and they don't use it, because you definitely want these documents to be relevant. Question from Maria here: what is the project plan document and who writes it? Well, the project plan is the broader description across the entire project of what's going to go on. Might be an umbrella document that encompasses a lot of other documents like the configuration management plan, the test plan, the development plan, release plan, support plan, etc. In terms of who writes it, well, that really varies. It could be a product manager, it could be a project manager, but somebody should own it. Jared asks, as the test plan is more of a living document, is it appropriate to create it as more of a brainstorming tool such as XMind, or is it more important to harden, baseline, and version the artifacts such as PDF? I think this is really going to be organizationally dependent. I can imagine situations where doing something that's just some sort of loose brainstorming tool was not enough structure. And I can also imagine situations where this sort of baselining and versioning and so forth could put it in place too much structure. So, I think this one you have to sort of figure out on your own. Is the plan helping us do better testing is ultimately the question. And if the answer is yes, then, you must be doing this appropriately. But if people are saying plan's too slow moving, can't adapt to change, etc., then maybe you've got too much structure around it. So a question here from Rama that starts off John. I'm not sure who John is. John is not me. If your budget is limited and you produce only one document, which one would you recommend, the test strategy or the test plan? Well, I mean, if I'm running a single project, then all I need is a test plan. If it's a one-off project, you don't need a strategy because strategy is project independent, right? Now, if you're doing an ongoing operation, there's going to be a series of projects, and you don't have enough time to write down a test plan for each project. I mean, I'd want to have a test strategy, I guess, but I mean, that's curious because there's going to be planning. So, yeah, it seems kind of a strange trade-off to make. Christian asks, what book would you recommend to improve test plan writing skills? Well, of my books, Advanced Software Testing Volume 2 addresses test plan writing, and Managing the Testing Process address test plan writing. So either of those would be good. I got a question from Steve here. I like the idea of test policy, strategy, plan working together. We often have a problem of getting test plans approved. Doing that for every iteration would not be possible. What do you suggest for approvals? Perhaps different approval levels. Yeah. So going back, you say iteration, so I assume you're talking Agile here. In an Agile world, you would not have a separate plan for each iteration. You have a plan that spans all of the iterations, And what happens is that gets added to or made specific in some way in a very brief addendum for each iteration. So the approval of the test plan is something that would happen in probably with a broader scope at the beginning of the sequence of iterations, and then the approval of the addendum for a particular iteration would be something that would just be, up to the sprint team. Courtney asked a related question here of, after the first round of test plan approvals, do we need to seek approvals every time the test plan is updated? This is going to depend on the way you're set up. Again, if you're following an agile approach, I would expect that you would get the plan approved in a more broad sense at the beginning prior to the first iteration, and then the specifics of what testing is going to happen exactly for a particular iteration are addressed in an addendum, short, maybe 1 or 2 page addendum that's produced at the beginning of each iteration and is approved by the sprint team. If you're talking about the sequential life cycle model, well, this can depend a lot in terms of how change management is done. Definitely you want to avoid changing the plan without making the appropriate stakeholders aware of it, though. So think about the change that you made and think about how that affects your different testing stakeholders. And you don't want to create a situation where people are surprised later and they point to the test plan and say, hey, in here you said you were going to do this, and how come you didn't do that? And I'm disappointed, and you didn't achieve your objectives. And that, so, change management really is, a lot of it is about preventing surprise. Also, of course, it's about preventing inefficiency and mistakes. But, from the preventing surprise perspective, make sure that you've addressed that issue. Mary asks about getting a copy of the slides. So once again, go to rbcs-us.com, go to the Resources tab in the upper middle, pull down the menu from there, navigate to the Basic Library, and you'll find this presentation at the very end of that page. Let's see. Steve says, who do you suggest approves each artifact? So the test policy, I think this should be approved at a senior management level. You really want to make people aware of what it is you're trying to accomplish. The strategy, that's going to be more like people that are direct participants, stakeholders in individual projects. The people who are going to be affected by how you go about doing your work. There might be parts of that document that you show to more senior managers. And then the plans, that again is going to be, participants in the project. Payush asks, great insights, Rex, as always. Thank you for that. Would you like to add user acceptance testing specific tips, strategy, plan, acceptance, etc.? I think user acceptance testing should be addressed in the policy and the strategy. Talk about how that's aligned with the overall set of testing activities that are going on. As far as the plan, it kind of depends on ownership, Piyush. You get in a lot of situations where the acceptance testing is owned by users, and maybe they don't want to write up a specific plan and so forth. So, it can be that maybe there's not a formal acceptance test plan, but the acceptance testing is described in the strategy. Irma says, thank you for a very informative seminar. You are welcome. Concept of a unified test policy and strategy is something that we can definitely streamline the process of creating test plans. Yes, that definitely can help with that. So good luck. Janice asks, what kind of test metrics should one include in the exit criteria? I would not include any specifically, the metric itself is not going to be defined there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically reference the test results reporting dashboard that I have. So I would refer you to the presentation that I gave on testing metrics a while ago. There's a recorded webinar on that. And also we now have a virtual workshop class that we're going to be rolling out in 2013. It's a 3-hour class that we will charge for it, but it won't be much. I think it's going to be like $199. And you'll be able to take that if you want, get more thinking about the kinds of metrics that you might want to use. Jared says, what are your thoughts on creating an automated test harness to mock objects that will be delivered to your test team by another test team as pre-acceptance test entry criteria to validate the expected inputs and outputs delivered prior to code drops? Is this a good practice, or is it better to integrate the code and utilize more of an automated black box approach? I like that idea. I like both. I like the idea of having an automated build test that's constructed of automated unit tests, and also ideally some automated integration tests that work through mock objects and so forth at a unit and integration level, and then that being augmented by some sort of black box type of approach using, say, Quick Test Pro or Selenium or something like that. Gene says, thank you, good stuff. You're welcome. Enterprise testing is a new entity in our organization. Any other useful resources of any kind for a new department under new but experienced leadership just getting off the ground? Thanks. Well, I mean, certainly, this is something that I discuss in managing the testing process and in Advanced Software Testing Volume 2. It's about test management. So, I would say take a look at those. Obviously, we've got all of the recorded webinars that you can access on our digital library. And, RBCS also offers training and consulting. So if you would like some more direct help from us in getting things off the ground and training people there, send an email to info@rbcs-us.com, and we'd be happy to get you a quote. Let's see. Running low on time, but I think we got time for one or two questions. Here we got a question from Ken. When deciding what time is appropriate for the testing required, what techniques work best with flexibility and relevance to test and project can we use to derive estimates and knowledge? Ken, that's a great question, and I would ask that you hold that thought. We are going to rerun one of our most popular webinars ever, though this one is shaping up to be close to it. We're going to rerun one of our most popular webinars ever on test estimation. I believe that's next month. Watch for the invite, and it will be coming out soon. Maria asks, am I correct that the test policy and strategy are the same for all projects within the organization? Yes, they should be, though if the organization has different branches that do very different things, they might actually be different. So, for example, if I were in an organization like, let's say, Pfizer or something that does, some of the software is safety critical, regulated for medical use, and some of the other software is just like the company website, obviously I would have very different policies and strategies for how I test the safety critical medical software versus how I test information that gets posted on the company website. Rich says, hi Rex, thanks again for this great webinar. You are quite welcome. Can you recommend any good dashboard applications for reporting bug data? Well, if you're asking about tools, Rich, I try not to get into any sort of specific recommendations of tools. And again, if you're asking about specific metrics, check the RBCS website. We've got all sorts of resources there. Talk about metrics, and again, keep your eyes open for the new virtual workshop series that's going to be coming out. Rich follows up, I just purchased your book and I'm looking forward to putting it to good use. Cheers, Rich. Thanks. Hope it does help. So we're out of time, so just want to close this session by letting you know a few more things about the resources available through RBCS. We run these free webinar sessions once a month, so check our website, rbcs-us.com, to sign up. If you'd like a special webinar presentation for your company only of this webinar or on any other topic related to software testing, send an email to info@rbcs-us.com or via our website. If you don't receive our regular free newsletter, sign up at rbcs-us.com. This will get you valuable discounts on consulting and training services, along with the regular newsletter, which will have a featured article on software testing, as well as news about what RBCS and its partners are doing. We're on Twitter. We are at RBCS. We're on Facebook, RBCS-INC. Do remember to check your email over the next couple days. You could be the lucky winner of a free e-learning course. You were registered for that course by simply attending. Check out the blog, rbcs-us.com/blog. Post comments. You can email me if you want to discuss something on the blog. Send the email to info@rbcs-us.com with the word blog in the subject line. You can check out the digital library. We've got recorded webinars, podcasts, and videos where you can get our podcast via iTunes. Enter RBCS podcast into the search string. You can subscribe to the RBCS channel on YouTube. We post these recorded webinars there as well. So all these are free resources for the software testing community, because at RBCS we are a not-just-for-profit company. This concludes the webinar. Thanks to everyone for joining us today, and hope you have a great rest of the week, and look forward to seeing you again in our December webinar.
Hi, I'm Rex Black, President of RBCS. Welcome to the RBCS YouTube channel. Hey, I hope you enjoy all these free resources that are available here. And do us one favor. We need to keep the lights on, and we need your help to do that. So, when you need testing and quality related services, training, consulting, expert services, you name it, let us be one of the bidders on that next job. We don't expect to get all of your business, but we'd like to get a chance. Thanks, and enjoy the shows.